For some reason, I was sitting here and something said, Lisa, go on live again. I have no idea why. So my guess is there's someone out there who needs some piece of information from me right now. I don't know what it is. I mostly create content on speaking skills and artful aging, as well as ADHD content, women's empowerment, and increasingly I'm talking about relationships and empowerment for men in various ways, especially around how to relate to women, how to have better relationships with women, dating, all that kind of stuff. That hasn't really been my content area yet, but I have a feeling in 2023 I'm going to be moving a lot more towards that. I'm a student of masculine, feminine, relational and sexual polarity, and it's ties in with my superpower, which is connecting people and ideas, and my skill set that is supporting people in being effective communicators. So sounds like all great stuff. Yeah, thanks for being here, the co-parenting coach. Oh, that's great. I love your username. Gives me a real sense of what you do. And one of the things I tell people is that your username matters. And the co-parenting coach is a really good example of a great username. It's extremely easy to read. I can parse it even though there's no dots or underscores or anything else. And I have a sense that you're a coach who works as a collaborator with parents to be effective. And that's a lot of information that one can get right in their bio. So if you're someone who is thinking about creating content, and maybe you're even in my mastermind or my masterclass today on focusing on 2023 as an opportunity for creating content. So if you're someone that's in that situation, one of the things I definitely talk about is how are you using your bio and your username? So that's a really good example. So I'm going to just do this as an Ask Me Anything. My content is usually around speaking skills, artful aging. I generally am supporting women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s in strengthening their voice, finding their stories, showing up, taking up space, beauty, visibility, wisdom, wealth, all those things. And increasingly wanting to serve and support men in having effective and enjoyable, powerful relationships with women. Mindfully here now, you think you're supposed to be here? I think so too, and I'm so glad you are. I feel that. It's such a weird thing. I don't consider myself to be an intuitive person or any, that's not really something I consider to be my strength. But for some reason, I was sitting here and I really felt this feeling like you need to go live. And my intellectual brain said, no, but you already did a live today. You were on for an hour and 10 minutes. You did a whole masterclass at 7:00 at night. Why would you go live? And something just said, I don't know, but do it anyway. And I thought, well, what have I got to lose? So I'm doing this as a little chit chat. Ask me anything. You can ask me anything you want, but obviously the content areas that I'm usually best at responding to have to do with communication, speaking skills, artful aging, women's empowerment, etc. So here's a question for all of you. If you tell me something that isn't on your heart or mind right now, what is current, what's present for you right now? Because that might give me the insight. That might give me information about what it is I'm supposed to be here talking about right now, because I have no idea. I don't think I want to reiterate my whole content from today on getting on social media in 2023. 4 things that I want to support women especially, but increasingly men and anyone with a marginalized identity is in voice, knowing and sharing their story, because it will help them to build a platform and to make a difference in the world, and it can help other people as well. Visibility, which to me means showing up, taking up space, knowing that we're valid and that so many of us have had the message that we need to be small, that there's no room for us, that we're too old or too late. And instead, I say, let's take up space, let's change the narrative together by having the courage and the energy and the commitment to being present and to saying, hey, I'm here and I'm not going to be small. I'm going to share what I have and what I know. Just like, just in case you forget, says, remember that I'm a light in a dark world and you are too, and that we can keep being ourselves and that that's enough and that it matters. And then wisdom and wealth. Wisdom is what comes. It's one of the principles of Artful Aging. It's one of the things I believe that women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s are one of the most underutilized, undercompensated, unacknowledged, precious resources that our culture has available to it, and that it would benefit everyone if we built our confidence and built our willingness to show up, and if we were acknowledged, pulled in, centered, and, more effectively utilized by our culture because we have so much to give. And then the wealth, I believe that women and people with marginalized identities need more money. I don't think there's a very accurate or fair distribution of wealth in this culture, and I don't think that anyone has the power to choose and be completely free unless they have financial autonomy. So I want more money for more women. Imposter syndrome. Yeah, share some thoughts. So imposter syndrome is extremely common, the co-parenting coach. I kind of put it in the same bucket as vulnerability hangovers. In order for us those of us who are humans, all of us, we're delicate. We're such delicate human beings who all we want is to be a part of things. We want to be connected and we want to be loved and appreciated, recognized and seen. And most of us have obstacles to that because we're human, because we have old stories, because we have wounding from our childhood, because we've had challenging life experiences, all the different reasons. And so sometimes our belief systems about ourselves get in the way and we don't actually know how worthy and valuable we are. And so we hear other people saying that we're great and we think that we're fooling them. So imposter syndrome is this idea, and it's especially true for people who are extra competent and very intelligent to have imposter syndrome. People who are acknowledged for their gifts are very likely to think that they're fooling people. And I think the culprit is massive and ubiquitous, low self-esteem. People often don't believe their own worth and their own value. And then when they hear it reflected to them, instead of believing it and breathing it in and accepting it and saying, oh my gosh, okay, it's so true, and feeling it, they think they're fooling people. So that's the basis of imposter syndrome, and it's extremely common. So I hope I spoke to that as you might have if you had the voice yourself, co-parenting coach. I bet you could have spoken to it yourself. Okay, so Jen says, what about the biggest lesson you learned this year? I had a lot of lessons this year, and I think that's a great question. I'm just going to scan these questions first, trying to find connections. Very hard to find it. Don't have any friends. It's extremely hard mindfully here now, especially because I think we're coming out of the pandemic in ways that we haven't even deeply understood the cost that this weird period of time has had on us. I think so many people have COVID inertia and are feeling isolated. So I don't think you're alone in that. And I also feel for you. I feel your pain on that. Hang in there. We're increasingly going to be, coming out of the difficult period of time that we've been in, and things are going to be changing. And just stick with it, because it's not going to be forever. And keep on looking for ways to connect. Keep on building your own skills. Keep on stretching yourself and putting yourself in situations that maybe aren't the most comfortable, but might give you an opportunity to create new connections. Sometimes when we feel isolated, we isolate ourselves even more. Don't know where to find people to connect with. Well, where do you live? Do you live in an area where anybody else lives? Do you live in a town, or are you out in, are you far away from other people? Because going to events that are the types of things that you're interested in, first thing, ask yourself what you're interested in, what you love, and then find places to go where other people who might have similar interests will also be. Meetup is a great resource. Looking for events on Facebook if you're on Facebook. Conscious Fellow says, as an extreme introvert, what do you feel is the best method to overcome it and become more social? Oh, wow. So the truth is, I am not an introvert, or at least I'm not very high on the introvert scale. Hi, sweetie. Hi. Hey. I'm just doing a live. I'll be there in a little bit. I'm not an introvert, so it's a little bit hard for me to say what the answer to that is, but I would think it'd be to connect in small groups or with one-on-one. Maybe reach out to a friend, or go for a walk with someone, and maybe find some kind of activity that you like to do and start to do it, and maybe bring one or two people into it. Again, I'm not an extreme introvert, so it's a little bit hard for me to speak to it. I'm the person that wants to go out and meet people and be with lots of people. So I think for extreme introverts, maybe the thing is you have to manage your energy. So maybe you put yourself out into a situation that's social in a way that's going to tire you, but then you give yourself time to regroup and to re-energize in the ways that introverts really need to, which is generally to have some alone time and some space to themselves. So I think for you, probably is a matter of managing your energy. If anybody else wants to share their greatest learning from the year, that would be fantastic. I'm going to share one of mine that I was dealing. Okay, so here's my little story. About 5 or 6 months ago, I was dealing with extreme hypochondria. I started having hypochondria after my mom died in a really short amount of time. She was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in June of 2016, and she died 3 months later. And ever since then, I've had a tendency towards hypochondria and feeling like I have something wrong with me. And so about 6 months ago, I had a very extreme case of that where every couple of days I was thinking, oh my gosh, I think I have throat cancer. And then the next day I think, oh, but hold on a second, my stomach feels weird. And it was nonsensical in the fact that it was shifting so much, but it was very real to me emotionally. And I'd had it before, and I'm sure I'll have it again. But there was a period of time in that stage when I felt like I had to accept it. One day I was in the shower and I was thinking, well, maybe you're going to die. Maybe tomorrow you're going to get a diagnosis that's going to tell you have stage 4 throat cancer and you're going to have a month to live. And I went with it, and I got connected to, and it hasn't completely left me since then, the fact that if that's the case, then I will do what I usually do, which is I will make the best of it. And even more, I will take whatever time I have and make art out of it. Maybe it means I'll write a book, because I was having all this fear, like, what about my kids? What am I going to tell my kids? And how are they going to be? And what about all this stuff? No, I'm not saying I'm completely over this existential crisis and fear of mortality, but he did have a shift in perspective that I think has stayed with me to some degree, and I hope I can stay connected with it, which is that the reality is, and part of my Artful Aging model is, that we have to graciously accept that which we can't change. And so in that particular moment, I realized that whatever it is I'm dealt, I'm going to just do the best to make the most out of it in whatever way I can, to make whatever art I can make out of it, whatever communication I can make out of it. Now, does that mean I'm never going to be afraid or have a panic attack or, think negative thoughts? No, probably not. But I have a little closer access to shifting into that perspective now, ever since I went through that stage about 5 or 6 months ago. So I think the biggest learning I got from that was remembering that, and it's a bit of a cliche, but really remembering that whatever comes your way, whatever circumstances thrown your way, your job is to make meaning out of it in the best way you possibly can, and to make as much art and joy as you can from it, because there isn't really anything else you can do. When you're thrown circumstances that are beyond your control. Now, again, I'm not saying that if and when I'm faced with really challenging situations, I'm not going to feel panicky or upset or angry or any of those things. But the other thing is, all of our emotions are valid. We can bring our emotions to the making of the art of our lives. So that was a big one for me this year, because I really did struggle with that. I've struggled with that for the last 4 or 5 years. Exactly. Thank you so much. It feels so good just to say that. Oh, for the introvert, the co-parenting coach says, start by growing deeper relationships with the friends you already have. I love that, the co-parenting coach. It's less draining. That is such a good suggestion. I love that. Thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it. Definitely agree. People drain me. Yeah. That's the thing about introverts, is they get drained by social interactions, whereas extroverts generally get fed by it. Mindfully here now says, I literally feel lighter just by letting it go and being heard by you. Oh, I'm so glad. I knew there was a reason that I was supposed to come on here today. And again, I'm not usually that's not usually my orientation, but I really felt it today. So let me see if there's anything else I learned this year. I know there's a bunch of other things I learned this year. Well, I had a lot of shifts in perspective in myself, especially around healing. I did a lot of healing this year. I'm about 4 years out of a divorce, and there was a lot that shifted for me in my perspective and my healing on that journey. And it's been a process, and I would say this year, the biggest thing I got is a lot more empathy and compassion for the masculine heart and the pain that men experience and the difficulty and challenges that they face that I might not always, as a woman, always necessarily recognize or see into, because I think we operate differently. So I got a lot of insight into the differences between men and women's needs and what we want and what our pain points are. And that gave me a lot more compassion. Another thing I think I've realized for myself personally is that if I could do nothing else, like if I could just hang out on lives all day and help people with things, I would be super happy. I really love nothing more than interacting with people around topics that maybe I have some way to support them. And I think I've started to trust that as I recognized my ADHD brain more and more in the last few years. I started to trust more and more that what I want to do is valid and useful. I don't need to second guess my own desires because they might be bad or wrong, but rather they're going to lead me in the right place. I had someone on my podcast who made this comment that I've loved ever since and quoted it many times. He said, there's a time in your life when hedonism meets altruism, which to me means that what feels good to you is also what's going to be contributive. That what you want to do and what feels good is something that's going to be contributive. So I think that's beautiful. I definitely experienced that in my life. I don't know if it's to do with age or just different perspective, but that's what I see. Co-parenting coach says, what were some of the differences that you noticed about men's pain? Yeah, so a number of years ago, I had a dinner for 8 men, and I made them a dinner, and I made a really nice space, and I had them all bring a question that they would want to ask other men, and I had a bunch of questions to ask them, and we spent about 3 hours talking. And 7 of them out of 8 men said that one of the most difficult things in their life was that they didn't have a positive male role model that was supportive of them in an emotional way. They didn't have a positive emotional male role model. That was one pain. And then the second pain was that they felt an enormous amount of responsibility and pressure to financially and logistically provide for their current family or a future family that they were hoping to have. And that felt like a pressure that took away from their personal freedom to do the things that they wanted to do. So, and that's such a big cost. I think I haven't always had as much empathy or appreciation for that piece as that lands on men in our culture, because that's part of the patriarchy, right? Part of our division in inequity financially and responsibility is that men have tended to have more money and more power than women. Women have had to be dependent in ways that are not conducive to freedom for them. But the flip side of that coin is men have also been the ones who have had the majority of work in the world put on them. And by nature of not having had positive emotional role models in the form of other men, are often dislocated and distanced from their own emotional journey and richness and autonomy. So I think that's the other piece I've realized, is that there are ways in which women have been limited by our patriarchal culture, and that's generally been around power, voice, presence, and financial sovereignty and autonomy and equity. And men have been limited by our patriarchal culture in terms of not having very much autonomy emotionally and socially. And a lot of times they're dependent on women for that. And I really believe that until those things are equaled out, until women have equal financial access and therefore choice in their relationships and in their actions in their lives, and men have powerful connections to their emotions and their social worlds in such a way that they're not dependent on women for that we're always going to be brought together in relationship out of need and dependency, which will always fail rather than power and choice. So many times men will jump right into other relationships because they don't have emotional autonomy, because they associate sex with intimacy, because it's the only way they know to have closeness and intimacy with other people. And women have had to historically jump into relationships because they have not had the same access to financial resources and autonomy as men have had, generally speaking. So those are a couple of realizations I've had this year. I really feel the cost to men for those things, especially the social and emotional piece, is really, really big. And what a big cost that is to men, how much they need women in a certain kind of way because they don't have emotional support in the form of communities and really deep, close friendships. Again, generally speaking, some men do. And a brotherhood. Women tend to have groups of women who are their support. We've, for generations and centuries, known how to create relationships with each other, for each other, and been in support of each other. But men have not had that historically, and it's a huge cost to them. So that's some of what I've been thinking about. If we're just meeting, my name is Lisa Lacroix. I mostly create content on speaking skills so that women and people with marginalized identities can have more access to their story, to share their truth, to show up in the world, to be visible, because that's how we change the narrative on aging. And so I talk about artful aging, speaking skills, ADHD content. I talk about my dance journey and women's empowerment. And increasingly, I'm talking more and more about relationships between men and women. I'm expecting that in 2023, I'm probably going to start doing more content for men specifically. But so far, that's not been my focus. So thank you so much for being here. It was really nice to meet you. So lots of love to everyone. Have a wonderful holiday. And I'm sure I'll be doing lives over the next week or so. So hope to see you again.